Thank you for joining us today. This is the this is the Progressive Caucus, General Assembly meeting, our public meeting for the week of February 10th. And we have some special guests today, and we're gonna get to them very quickly. Maybe we could just first introduce ourselves, and then we're gonna take 1 minute for any updates that we wanna put out there, and then jump right into our focus discussion for the day. So I'm Representative Brian Chena from Burlington, Chittenden 15.
I'm Representative Chloe Tomlinson from Reducing Chittenden.
I'm Chad Simmons, the Executive Director of the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont.
I'm Caitlin Britt with Action Service.
Chris Miller was the intern, but right now I'm here just as a member sitting. Palestine and investigating Caucus.
Brenda Siegel, Executive Director of Action Service. Graham Lake, I'm from the Progressive Party. I'm from Brandon.
Heather Thomas, Executive Director of Progressive. Brittany Record, House of Representatives.
Thank you. So we'll just have a minute for updates. I was a little late coming because I was talking to the chair of healthcare. We're gonna take up healthcare and AI issues next week. So we were planning for that. So that's my update, is that keep posted for hopefully some significant testimony about the impact of artificial intelligence in the healthcare sector. Another update I would give is that this next week we are electing the Adjutant General and trustees to state colleges. So that's going to be a big thing coming up in the next 2 weeks. Any other significant events you can think of?
I have an update.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everyone's aware there are really significant concerns about funding for public transit, specifically Green Mountain Transit. There's been a lot of ups and downs, but the most recent update is that without clarity on additional revenue sources or support from the state from this session, they will likely need to do pretty substantial service reductions again. I'm working in conversations with folks about that and trying to see if we can do this session related to that. And otherwise, I just think it's really important for everyone in the caucus to be aware of H772, the landlord-tenant bill, which we're talking about today, which is why we're talking about it. But it's very alive right now in the House General Housing Committee, and it looks like it's. I'm not clear if it's moving on a vote this week. I need to look at the agenda, but it's moving really quickly. And so if there are significant concerns we have about it, which I think there may be, now is really a key time to be in conversation with that committee and be proactive about shaping the bill so that that's something that that's my opinion.
Do you have any updates from the party? Yeah, so then maybe we could just jump right into our guests to make sure we give you the remainder of the time to talk about this very important issue. So Chloe, I'll let you kind of launch us into this discussion.
Thanks. Great. Well, Chad and Brenda, thank you both so much for being here today. I know it's a really hectic time with these bills, and you're doing so much in terms of offering testimony and your expertise on them. We wanted to spend some time in the Progressive Caucus understanding more about the bills, and particularly if there are specific concerns you have about what's in there or things that you'd really like to see in the bills that we're not seeing. There's a lot moving. There's H772, which I just mentioned, related to a landlord-tenant law, as well as the Thomas. You're in the right place. Get another chair. Can I pass this chair down? Take up space. Oh, you need a chair. Oh, no. Yeah, do you want a chair? There you go. Sure? Yeah. Thank you. So in addition to H772 around landlord-tenant law, there's also the emergency housing bill, and it sounds like there's some other housing-related items that we might want to touch on as well. So I think we're going to have a sort of open discussion. We'd love to hear from maybe Chad and then Brenda on thoughts you have on those bills, and then we can have a little bit more discussion. Does that work for you guys?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe we can start with 772. Landlord
limited.
So again, I'm Chad Simmons with the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont. We have been asked to kind of weigh in on the landlord-tenant bill, 772 in particular, but also the suite of bills that touch on landlord-tenant related issues. I would say that I don't have like I'm not a lawyer, and so I wouldn't rely on my assessment of what each provision means. But from our perspective and our members, here are a number of things that we have both questions, concerns, and see opportunity. One is, I think first and foremost, we've shared with the committee that if any of the provisions in the bill or any of the other bills increase homelessness, especially unsheltered homelessness, we would have strong concerns with any bill moving forward. I think that as we're working as advocates, we've heard that we want to prevent that from happening at all costs, and we're concerned that some of the provisions would increase the amount of homelessness. So I think that's the first thing that we have flagged as part of the bill. I think the second thing is that we would like to see additional supports, and we're happy to see additional supports for programs like that run through CDOEO, Vermont Legal Aid, Vermont State Housing Authority that improve both landlord education and access to property owners and landlords, understanding fair housing law, and their roles and responsibility in administering fair housing law and providing safe housing for everyone. And then we're also in support of the Vermont State Housing Authority Rental Careers Program. I know that's being discussed in other bills as well. And protections such as those are vital to keeping people housed, and then working with property owners and landlords to pay any back pay or anything that would put them at risk of being unhoused. I would say that one of the kind of two pieces that we would say, talking to our members who do provide housing, especially our nonprofit mission-driven organizations, is they are struggling right now. My previous role was with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and so we saw on kind of the back end just the real financial and workforce, honestly, burden that many of the nonprofit housers are experiencing in trying to meet the increased demand of and needs for folks who are experiencing mental health crisis, substance use disorder, or exhibiting violent behavior. So we are also aware of the need to protect residents and tenants within the existing homes to ensure their safety and their ability to remain in those housing units. So we would advocate for some mechanism under existing law that would allow folks providing housing to work with either the legal system or existing service providers to maybe get people into supportive housing, so either respite, certain different types of family supportive housing, or some sort of existing housing program or service instead of going through an eviction process. And in the event that some sort of removal from the home is necessary, we would want there to be, under existing law, some mechanisms for those housers to be able to use with a plan. I think that's the really important piece, is there would need to be some sort of plan in order to ensure that we're not creating homelessness. I think so what I would say is we would want to see, in addition to the programs named in the bill, and in others, we would want to see increased funding and support for existing services and support systems like Pathways Vermont, to be able to provide that kind of those kind of resources in the event that a nonprofit houser or property manager would need some support in their housing units. I think the final thing I would say is just essentially a word of caution for the legislature in taking action one way or another, or not taking action, and understanding that this is a housing market, so by doing one thing or not doing one thing, there may be consequences on that end. So for example, over the summer and fall and in my previous work, in talking to landlords, folks are pretty clear that if they don't find the relief that they're seeking, that they'll just end up taking those units offline. And I think that would exacerbate our housing crisis. Fortunately, we have a really robust nonprofit system and network across the state that are mission driven. But we're concerned with the unintended consequences of not taking action and potentially seeing more housing units come offline. I would point to the housing needs assessment where, and then subsequent data showing that more and more folks are moving towards short-term rental as a way to generate income from their housing that they may own or have available. And that income may be seen as an opportunity to get out of the long-term rental market. So we would just flag that that is a potential unintended consequence of not taking.
Just to clarify, when you're saying landlord relief, are you referring to provisions like changes to the eviction process and expedited measures, easier?
Right.
Okay.
So our or programs like Vermont State Authority, Housing Authorities Rental Arrears Program. Either financial or resource support or a mechanism to move folks from one kind of housing that might not be the best fit in the moment into some other type of housing or shelter that would be a good fit. So I think that those are the dynamics that I think we're seeing from our community. And again, HHW represents a pretty broad group of folks across the state.
So we are going to support anything that changes the eviction law to better support landlords and not support tenants. And that's what we are concerned with this is that's happening with that bill and the bills around it. There also we hear that the just cause eviction, that getting rid of just cause eviction is going to be watered down in the language that's currently happening. And so that would or start having just cause eviction, and that was sort of one of the only good things that we could really find in there. We don't. I did some research. We'll be pulling out the data. It will be in my testimony tomorrow because the full report isn't out yet. And it talked a lot about evictions and how many people had experienced an eviction who are experiencing homelessness. And it is a huge number. So out of the 200 people, it was over 80 people who had became homeless because of eviction. But there was an additional. This is not an exact number because I'm not looking at it right now. But there was an additional large number of people who had not experienced an eviction but had moved out because the landlord did not repair their apartment when it was not safe or healthy. And I want to just share with you, and I'll be sharing this tomorrow as well, that when my son was little, when he was young, I have a Section 8 voucher. My landlord had, there was black mold in my apartment and there were rats. And I was withholding rent because of that. Section 8 was not, the housing authority wasn't withholding rent, but they were not faulting me for withholding rent. Sometimes they do it that way. And the landlord eventually not only tried to evict me, but also went down to the housing authority to make up stories about me that almost made me lose my housing voucher. This bill, as far as I'm concerned, basically gives landlords the right to make stuff up, and it's going to have implications for racism, for homophobia, for all kinds of versions of discrimination, and so it absolutely cannot fly the way that it is right now. And eventually I got help from legal services, but that took a long time. I am as we all know, a fairly savvy person, and even though I wasn't as savvy then, I was still savvy and educated and had family with resources, and I was able, through a large fight, I did agree to move out, but I was able to never return the money that was for the apartment, never fixed. And I was able to get $500 from the landlord, but for most people experiencing homelessness, that ends in an eviction that goes on their record. And what we're talking about right now is, if I don't want a tenant in my apartment, I can just say that they're selling drugs. It's a landlord attestation. That's a huge problem. That's a gigantic, significant problem of giving people with resources power over others that don't. So that is a huge problem. We instead are suggesting that there is a restorative justice process that's implemented, that's a system that works. It keeps people from entering homelessness, and that we fund restorative justice centers to be able to do that work. And also, but because this is like a 3-day turnaround. One of the versions of this is a 3-day turnaround. I don't know where they're at with the bill right now. 3 days is not enough time for us to get back to you. You will not get rental arrears in that time frame. You will not get that process. Just getting a call back from a CAP agency takes a couple of weeks. And then after that couple of weeks, you have to fill out an application. It can take literally months to get that process moving quickly. And so it's not really it's not a real solution to this problem. And what it is giving people with resources power over people with no resources in a much more aggressive way, and it increases homelessness I can't imagine the way it's going to increase homelessness, because in my own case that I told you about, my landlord would have happily gone and made up that I was selling drugs just to get me out of his apartment, because I was saying that there were rats there, because they were hissing at me in the kitchen. I had a small child, and I mean, literally hissing. If I went into the kitchen, that's how many rats were in my house. And I just wanted, I think that there are good actors, absolutely, in the landlord pool, but there are also a lot of bad actors. And there are a lot of people who we have to remember that being a landlord is a income, a revenue stream. So it isn't just about figuring out, so I mean, I know you all agree with this. I don't think that we can just say that it's, the harm caused to people who already have nothing is going to be so much greater than the harm caused to landlords if we don't fix it. And there's also, I just want to name that there's already a law on the books that says that you can evict someone within 15 days if it's for a legal reason. And perhaps that part of the process needs to be more effective and for a violent reason, rather than changing that process to something that makes it, literally just, I can say, just like in a shelter, just like in a recovery home, I can be like, I don't really like you, I'm gonna make some shit up and you're out. So, excuse my language. I realized we were live just then.
I think those are all really important points, and I would also recommend people go look at the landlord tenant study report that was done a couple of years ago. We heard a lot of really powerful testimony from lots of different people, but what in places that have passed just cause eviction has not slowed down the eviction process, and the Vermont eviction process is middle of the road on par with it. It is not, I mean, we had the judiciary committee say 75% of cases are solved in 60 days or less. So it is a solution in search of a problem. The real problem, as we know at this table, is people are being evicted to the streets. Already for no reason. I don't think that there's any way that the country's being evicted. And I've looked at I don't know which bills, which is their House bills, but I've certainly looked at a bit of a summary of what the bills are, and there's very little I even consider supporting. I know that this has been sold as a nice compromise. It's not. It's horrifically harmful to people who have nothing, while sort of a handout to people who have the privilege of being a landlord, because it's also not a right to be a landlord. It is, in my view, a right to have housing. But there was a lot of really compelling testimony packaged into a 12-page report We heard a lot about the impacts that just cause eviction has had in places like New Jersey, that's had it on the books for over 50 years. And places like New York, and it was very interesting because New Jersey and New York butt up against each other. They passed just cause eviction 50 years ago, and New York just passed it much more recently. And the New Jersey housing market was healthier, stronger, and had better, like, their rental market for both landlords and tenants was better than in New York that didn't have just cause eviction. So I do think it is really important not to get sort of caught in the rhetoric and actually look at the facts from across the country. Because lots of places have already done this stuff.
I think it would be really important for people to really understand the details of the bill as well, because as Brenda noted, it's sort of being billed as eliminating no cause, but that's not really an accuracy. I mean, it's certainly not adopting the majority of elements of just cause eviction policy, and so we need to just, I think, be really communicative with our colleagues and make sure people are aware of what's going on in the bill and also do
I think that's a good reminder too, that the House General Committee is actually squishing together like, I think 7 bills.
Yeah.
And one of them is a more robust just cause bill, I think by Representative Long. So I think, I'm not sure how much space that bill is getting in terms of like the prioritization. So I think that's a good reminder around like what is in 772 is not the same of what's in, I think it's 668.
So I just pulled up the report, my report that's not out yet, but I just thought to give you some numbers, but the cause of loss of housing, you know, the people that we interviewed, and these were voluntary interviews across the state in 5 counties and 10 towns. People in GA between 2023, September 2023, February 2024, and our third phase begins this month. So this is what they had. No cause eviction was 41 people answered no cause eviction, 20 people answered condemned housing. Couldn't
How many?
afford-
21?
20
Condemned.
condemned, couldn't afford rent, 20, and fleeing violence, 19, eviction non-specific, 16, family eviction, 11, non-payment of rent, 10, which is basically the same, but they didn't specify that they couldn't afford rent. Retaliatory eviction, 5, foreclosure, 7, health and safety issue unaddressed, 8, and flood or fire was 6. And then there were other reports that were lower numbers, and that was eviction due to disability, family member had died, exited foster care into homelessness, 6 since 18, exited institution to homelessness, separation or divorce and overcrowding. And I think that really importantly is among all those numbers, 47 people answered who lost housing that regardless of if this was why they left, they were living in a house with significant health or safety issues that were nothing. So 47 out of 200 people said that they had been living in a house that had health or safety issues, even if they didn't leave for that reason.
Will you share that report?
The report, yes, I don't know, I tested reviewed and I have no idea how long it's gonna take. But there'll be some data that will be included. I used to like promise a date and I've learned that that is not how public health distributors work.
The other thing I want to bring up, and we take testimony about this in judiciary, which is a weird place to take testimony about this, and we talked about it in the landlord tenant study, is the one factor that would probably be the single greatest factor in speeding up evictions would be guaranteed legal counsel. Because it's incredibly time consuming for someone to represent themselves pro se. It would create both fairness and a set up process. So if we really truly want a balanced solution that deals with both issues, guaranteed legal counsel for evictions would be a solution.
That would make sense to have judiciary then.
It came about because we were looking at guaranteed legal counsel for all crimes, because right now only applies to major crimes, not misdemeanors. And we had some of the pro se attorneys in there testifying, and this just came up. And so it had more conversation, but what we did here is yes, someone has legal counsel, getting to resolution, we sped up significantly.
If you know where the data is that you mentioned earlier, please send it
The landlord.
to the landlord tenant data. That was like, the just cause data.
From New Jersey?
Yeah,
Hold on, I
I just want to include it tomorrow when talking.
It's in the report from the study committee 2 years ago.
And I know we just have about 5 minutes left, so wanted to make sure there was time for any, comments or flags that either of you want to raise around the housing discussions happening in Human Services Committee and that bill.
So, I don't know if you want to start. Yeah.
Gosh, where to start there?
No, I don't think I haven't read
Fighting
you read
off
the
a
new
lot.
draft yet?
I skimmed through it, it just came out at like 11 o'clock this
Yeah.
morning, and the committee is gonna be hearing it now.
Yeah.
But essentially, the goal, I think you summarized it well, earlier, is really to kind of provide, a new pathway for, responding to homelessness, so a new system. And it would be, in terms of process, the committee is looking at an expedited process. I think there's hearing today for the first time. They'll do a walkthrough, and then advocates are encouraged to kind of provide input over the next few days. And the goal from Chair Wood is to get passed out of the committee by the end of this week, maybe early next week. A couple of provisions that I can speak to that impacts us is encouraging the two continua of care, balance of state continuum of care, COC, which is the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont, and then the Chittenden County Homelessness Alliance, which is the collaborative effort for Chittenden County. The proposed legislation would encourage a merger of those two, and then provide a process and a timeline to get that done on or before July 1st of 2028. That provision most impacts our organization we'll be looking at, and the rationale behind that is to better align our data systems, so our assessment, coordinated entry systems, our statewide system for HMIS, which at the moment I'm forgetting what it stands for.
Homelessness
Management Information System.
Yeah.
And then it would also then encourage better alignment with and more transparency around project award allocation. It would be a significant process. The state cannot do that in isolation. It would have to be in collaboration with HUD to be able to make that merger happen. And so we'll be following that piece as well.
I don't know what the new draft says in the I've been in straight in things. So I don't know what the draft says about in terms of how we're using hotels or how we're using any of those things. That's kind of a TBD on and happy to come back and talk more about it once I have more information. But what I will say is that I think the desire is to do two things, put it into one system so that people in GA are not getting something different than people in shelters would get. And I think they're trying not to alarm people with that they're ending GA, but the intention is to still be able to utilize hotels, but I don't know what actually ended up in the bill. The devil's definitely in the details on that one. And I think that there's been a lot of clear information that there's people who are providers who are left out of the system. And Health Assist Vermont included, but there's other providers as well who are not funded and that there's too much flexibility in terms of how OEO uses those funds. And so that kind of allows like case management and street outreach to be almost eliminated in the last top grant, or it allows hotel case management, or it allows them to not fund certain providers while other providers, but the certain providers aren't funded, they're still doing the work. It allows people with disabilities the current system allows people with disabilities to be pretty vastly discriminated against, I would say, And that needs to be addressed. And I'm hoping that that is addressed here. It sounds like it was a commitment from them. And I think that they are really hoping to get it out of a benefit and instead so that it can be more whole and human-centered, because the benefit piece of it has been wholly harmful from what it's happening.
Sensitive to sound.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Does that-
I'll,
does that
yep,
make
yep,
sense?
yeah, I'm just skipping over the intent language of the bill. So I think, as Brenda was saying, it sounds scary at first, that be ending the GA, emergency shelter benefit, and moving more towards, this may be a little, I'll say this out loud, it might be a little confusing, but they are gonna create then a continuum of supports as opposed to a continuum of care. So that would essentially provide kind of a suite of options around different housing and shelter types, more tailored towards people's needs, is how it's discussed here in the bill. That would also be connected to robust services. I think as Brenda was saying too, I think it's just identifying the need that there are gaps in this current system as it exists. And so resourcing community organizations and different entities in a way that allows flexibility.
And I think the other thing is that now, I don't know how it landed in there either, but that our understanding was that coordinated entry was gonna be more of the eligibility criteria rather than this like weird arbitrary eligibility. And that would allow providers to say, this is what this client of ours needs with more flexibility. I don't know how it landed, it might still be more patronizing than that, but that's what it, I think the intention was. And then the other piece that they want to make sure is that absolutely everybody is using HMIS and coordinated entry, and the reason some of us aren't is it's funding prohibitive and also weird. Like there's a kind of you have to have permission from the lead coordinated entry agency, so if they don't want you to be one of the people doing coordinated entry, you can't. And so that is, so those are things that I think hopefully this would fix. I think one of the flags that I'm worried about is isolating people with disabilities specifically into their own shelter space, because there's a long, very gross history of isolating people with mental illness or disabilities into away from the regular population. And that's something that I think this has to be done carefully and avoid, or else I think first of all, are infringing on the Olmstead decision, which keeps people in forced institutionalization, and so that's going to be a piece that Homelessness Vermont, who works with disabilities, people with disabilities, is going to be very focused on. And again, we are putting in, and I think probably GGB and the CAPS are all putting in a memo probably every day this week for every new draft to comment on what we think should change in the draft. So there'll be pretty detailed analysis coming from, however, ours last year, just for reference, they didn't get posted. So if you want them, I think it would be fair. I'm certainly willing to share them with the Progressive Caucus and make sure that you guys also have them, and we'll be posted to our website.
We will be as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because I know, and I appreciate you talking about this bill that's just hot off the presses. It's gonna be changing a lot this week,
Yeah.
so really grateful you both could come in, and we'll be seeking your expertise as we kind of stay tuned and how.
If I could just add one additional thing that we are following right now, kind of more an immediate issue, not that this isn't immediate, but a number of our manufactured housing communities have flagged that there are a couple of projects that are ARPA funded that are in the works right now and actually ready to go by the summer. Some of those ARPA funds have to be spent by the end of the year. And they had just learned that they are now on the hook for, in some, well over $100,000 of 3-acre rural impact fees. And as you all know, manufactured housing communities are one of the state's best ways of naturally occurring affordable housing. They oftentimes house the lowest income households across the state, many people making minimal fixed incomes. And so these resident-owned, nonprofit-owned communities are unable to come up with the financing to make up those fees.
Right.
And so we are seeking some very targeted relief for these communities to be exempt from the 3-acre rule impact fees. And so a couple of our members are hoping to testify in House Environment and or House General, and we do hope to bring it to the Senate as well and speak with Senator Watson and Senator Clarkson about this. But it's kind of a more of a timely issue because if this isn't addressed, they will either have to finance for those fees, which will increase rent in those communities, or they may be forced to not move forward with the ARPA funds. In terms of timing. So we just wanted to bring that up for folks.
Thanks for flagging that.
Yeah.
I think Rep. Logan has flagged something that she's been focused on, so we'll make sure to get updates from her as that.
Great. Excellent.
Certainly support that, and I think it's important to note that our manufactured home communities have just cause eviction protection already, and some level of rent control. I do always have concern when we're concentrating property and we're not really looking at meeting people. So yes, I support what you're talking about, and I think when we're having a longer conversation about solutions to this, think beyond concentrating property in the parks that are usually built in floodplains or so I think there's lots of things to unpack here.
Yeah, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why these projects are so important. These tools, it's extremely expensive to improve the infrastructure in general, but in manufactured housing communities, they have less access to capital to do that. So we have a really great nonprofit network. Liz Curry from Common Land Solutions has been providing technical assistance and one of our members. And so they're working with the communities to create more resiliency. They are also a great way for mixed income communities to form. So I absolutely hear you on that one. So this is just one tool in order to finance.
Yeah, like I said, I support what you're suggesting. Bigger picture conversation, we should be looking at full
I think
community
that's the
integration
same.
in income housing.
I'll be focusing both in the housing committees and in the home and in the health and welfare and human services on I have to walk out too, but on the how we don't isolate people in poverty, with disabilities, young children, like how are we creating this so that they are part of the community and we're not treating them as other. And by them I mean me, because that's been me for my whole adult life. So
And when we don't acknowledge that, we end up pulling our hair out saying, how did Decker Towers happen? It happened because we concentrated poverty and disability.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
We made a target.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both so
Thank
much for
you
being
for
here
having
and
us.
for that, for all your testimony.
I sent you a
Thank you.
I just sent you
We'll be
another
back next
recommended DSL
Tuesday.
research request I did.
All right.
Yes, love.